And he's buried up in Wiccanisco, where the tombstone was erected by people in the community. All right. Okay. And this would have happened between Loyalton and Likens. Closer to Likens, actually, is where it actually happened. And that should be the last thing we got to. Just keep in mind one other thing. That's Oakdale Station. That's in Loyalton. I just wanted to mention that and remind you of that. Mile Park down in Millersburg. I'm definitely going to talk more about that here in just a minute. There's the train. I'll spare you. Okay. All right. So the Wiccanisco Canal, then. Let's talk about that a little bit. The Wiccanisco Canal connected Millersburg to the canal, which goes the whole way down to Clark's Ferry Bridge and beyond. Not too worried about that. I'm just focusing mostly in Millersburg. This was actually right there in Millersburg, just on the opposite end of across the riverfront there where Brubaker Tools is. And actually into the 90s, some of the concrete structures were still there. So what I'm telling you would happen is the trains would come down and the arcs would flow right from the river, okay? And here's the trains coming down from Wiccanisco and Likens, and they would dump right here into the chute. The chute would go in, the coal would then go into the arcs, and the arcs would be on their way. But that's what's going on here. And then as they keep going, the next car dumps, just keeps a progression. Then they go back up to Wiccanisco or Likens, wherever they're going. But this right over here, this is the Susquehanna River, and that's Mount Patrick there in the background. Go ahead.
How they have the arcs back up the
river? That's a good question. They were actually pulled by mules for the most part. That's an excellent question, but that's actually how they did it. In some cases, if the water was too low, they would actually load the arcs onto a big barge and pull that up as well. Okay. All right, Austin, we read through this, please.
The Wiccanisco Canal connecting Millersburg with the Pennsylvania Canal was built in 1848. Up to the year 1859, the total shipment of coal from the Likens Valley amounted to 848,781 tons, showing how great this industry had become even at that early date.
Okay. Not worried you write down every last detail, the years and things like that. I just want you to be familiar of what's going on there. Okay. Just throwing a bunch of pictures in here. This is up by Likens. Again, we're back towards the mountain there in Likens. Just take a second. You can look through. Luckily, no one died in this train accident. But that happened just on the way into Likens, almost where the Rattling Creek is. Okay? And that was back in 1921. I don't know the details, but that was there yesterday. I showed you where the water tank was, and that was about right there. This one I don't have a better picture of, but this happened, I believe it was 1935, and that was another train accident. Again, notice how you have the two separate tracks there, okay? And what would happen is, throughout the valley, if you had another train, one was coming up through, you got off to the side, okay? That's where that phrase, getting sidetracked, comes from, getting off the main thought or whatever you're on. All right, so the Likens Valley Railroad, I mentioned this before, but let me be crystal clear. As you can see for yourself, this was only the fourth in the country, first in Dauphin County. And it transported anthracite coal. Now, first by horse-drawn wagons, later by train. And I do want you to know, keeping in mind, I mentioned this yesterday, it also did transport passengers as well. Okay. Gavin, did you ever talk to your grandpa about this by any chance? I'm just wondering if he knew anything. Has ever said anything? Now, obviously, well, through 1980, he would have actually been driving the trains then by 1980, but he never did on Likens Valley then. Okay. And again, as I mentioned yesterday, just make sure you make a small note there. The actual tracks were taken out in about 1980s when they started taking them out. About 1980. Now, that's not up there, but just be familiar with that year. I grew up in Elizabethville in the 70s. I do remember the train coming right up through. I do remember it stopping right up there at the square. I was very young, but I do remember that. That said, let me explain this. I do want you to be aware of this. Why were the train tracks taken out? Now the rail trail's still there. The trail's there, but the tracks are gone. The reason is, does anybody know who became president in 1980? Well, technically it was 81, but he won the election in 80. Anybody know? It's not Nixon. It's after Nixon. Again?
What?
Bill Gates. Wait, no, not Bill Gates. Bill Clinton.
Before Clinton. After Nixon, before Clinton.
Wrong last name.
Reagan?
Reagan, yes. When Ronald Reagan won the election, he stated that he was actually going to change transportation to alternative fuels. And many people got scared. Now, it never actually happened, but many people got scared that the trains were going to go, and it was really a business that was going to die out. So many people got scared, and the Lycans Valley Railroad, simply put, shut down as a result of that. Many train companies cut their budgets, and this was one that they cut out. It did not actually happen, but when he said that, many people thought it was going to happen. Okay. Again, another picture of the locomotive, which was used. That was actually the last one. If you go up here to Broad Street, okay, the winery's on your left. Go out to the stop sign. Directly across the street, that big white house there. Before that, that was where Don Lawyer lived, and he actually drove the last locomotive. Okay, that was back in the 50s that they drove this one. This is back behind the development down here below town, Bickle Crossing. You could actually drive a car across those tracks. That's what that is. That's also down here just west of the borough as well. That's down close to the hurdy-gurdy. Anybody live in Elizabethville? Anybody rode a sled down the hurdy-gurdy?
Probably.
That's like the rite of passage growing up in Elizabethville. The hurdy-gurdy is a trail back at the mountain where every kid, you had to ride a sled down the mountain. Yeah. I'll show you when we talk about Elizabethville. Okay, and there you can see once again the Lycans Valley Rail Trail, which is, again, something you're allowed to travel on. Although I'll tell you this story. I was walking up outside of Loyalton where it's public land. You can walk up through there, actually part of the water company land you're allowed to walk on. And I went walking up there a couple of years ago, and there was a guy that came out, and he has it posted. And I walked right through it. And he came out and gave me a hug. I said, this isn't your land. This is public land. And I know where the water company authority has their land up there. He said, no, you can be arrested for walking here. I said, well, do you realize that it's a crime to post land you do not own? And you do not own this. So do you want to really push this issue or what? Well, he backed off very quickly because he doesn't own the land. That's water company land. So nonetheless, but don't get into that if you don't know exactly where the boundaries are. I know where the boundary is. So I just went for a walk. Yeah, it's not your land. Now, on the other side of Loyalton, there is some private land that the trail does go through, and that is posted, and that's legitimate. Okay, Don Miller owns that, so just be careful. But pretty much everywhere else, you can almost walk from Millersburg the whole way up to Loyalton without any issues. You can definitely walk from the park up to Loyalton. That's all open land.
I'm pretty sure, depending on how it's posted, you can still walk on land.
Well, I'd be careful with that period because everybody will tell you something different, and I'm no lawyer, so I would not walk on posted land. If it's legitimately somebody else's land, I would stay out of it. Okay. Anyway, I think you get the idea. It's just a cross section. This would be the rail, okay? And then obviously you have the foundation. All right. We're not engineers. That is actually up where the firehouse is in Wiccanisco. That was actually a turntable. So obviously if the trains are coming up and then they want to turn around and go back down, that was greased that heavily. Okay, now just think about this. This is sitting on but basically a lazy Susan. And you're just going to push one end of it and it will spin the whole thing around. Physics, I'm sure Mr. Heath could explain it a lot better than me. But what they actually did is well greased as that thing was, one person could push on the end of that track and turn that entire locomotive around. One person. Whether or not they had their Wheaties that day, I don't know. But that's what they would say. One person could actually do it. I think that's pretty cool. All right, so here we go. Last story then we'll call it a week. Wiconisco Canal, I want you to be aware of this. Okay, Wiconisco Canal, got a bunch of pictures here. In addition to railroads, coal is also transported by arcs. I mentioned this before. Okay, just make sure you understand by the arcs. And you can see the arc boats, not like huge.
Was the ferry in Lawrenceburg ever used to transport coal?
No. Well, not that I know of anyway. I shouldn't say definitely no, but not that I know.
That thing's been running for quite a while.
Okay, so we have the arcs. Loading onto the arc, and that's part of the Wiconisco Canal. I'll just show you a bunch of pictures. Just take a look. Obviously, massive undertaking.
How many tons of coal did the arc hold?
It varied. Like if you look at the one on the left there, that would hold about 3. The one on the right could hold up to 20. It depends how much water's in it too, okay, and how dry it would be. That's why a lot of times they have the coal sitting on big piles to dry out, because you don't want to take it right out of the ground and put it on that. All right, it'd be way too much water. Okay, so you're looking at about 12 miles. I'm not going to test you on the locks and how many houses. But the final lock was down at Clark's Ferry Bridge. It's actually the wrong spelling of ferry. It should be Ferry.
I figured they left locks.
Yep, there were locks along the way. About 12 miles, and it went to Clark's Ferry Bridge. Let me just show you this, because I think that's an awesome picture. That's the canal, and what that is actually down there at the Mile Park. So, and in some cases, you actually had a bridge that would hold water as part of the canal. All right. Here's the pump house. It got the water right out of the river, and you can see the brick there on the right. Okay, take a look at that. See that? That's where it's at today. I just took that picture last year or last summer. Okay. You can see where it's located.
How deep did they normally have the locks?
About 3 to 4 feet was all you needed, because it was displaced that well. What we're talking about is right here. How many ever been on the swing bridge? Been there? Okay, go ahead into Canvas. Should be able to get this done. Yeah, we got 8 minutes. It's only about a 3-minute video. Tyler Adams graduated a few years ago. Well, been quite a while already. That should be on there. I think it's.
It is. It's on the bottom.
Wiconisco Canal link. You click on that. Give me 2 things you pull from this. But wait till you're finished. I'm not going to grade this harshly. Okay, just give it a listen. But it's a good video. 2 things on the text box will work. Oh yeah, I forgot to pass it around. Okay, I will put this right up here.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Have you ever been in the boathouse there?
No, walk by it a lot, but I've never been in the boathouse.
It's destroyed. There's no floor anymore.
I've figured that.
Yeah, there's
Hello?
bottles and broken glass in there. Saw a couple of syringes there too.
Which had nothing to do with the canal, I take it. Funny business going on.
Yeah. I just wanted to see what it was. Well, now I know what it was. I didn't know what it was at the time.
All right.
Now there's one of the beams from the ceiling's laying like this too.
It was neat how they have that V on it, though.